Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Amie from Ask a Christian. With me is I could say so many good things about this man, but is my friend, Mark Howard. The fact that he's willing to be my friend probably says more about him than anything else. But Mark has is going to bring us the study for today. And so I just want to start off with a couple announcements and remind you about what we've been looking at. So just kind of getting settled in here, had a rushed morning. I stayed up way too late making the printable, which I think is pretty cute. I showed my boyfriend and he said, yeah, it looks pretty terrible. But he thought I was talking about something else. He quickly recovered. I'm not mad at him. He said, yeah, it looks like a normal worksheet page. So you know what? That's probably good enough for me this morning.
I can see Brian saying both of those. It sounds terrible and it sounds good. No, it looks terrible and it looks good. I can definitely see that.
Yeah, and being completely convincing in both of them. So anyway, thank you for joining us as we get in today's study. Yesterday, well, of course, we're studying who was Jesus of Nazareth, looking at historical perspectives, certainly biblical perspectives, as we talked about in night one. The Gospels in the Bible are still the best information we have. We have a few historical anchor points, and we can feel confident that the grand sweeping patterns of history are giving us good info about who Jesus was, even if we cannot historically pinpoint, these messages, these quotes, these stories. We have good reason to believe that the kernels of them are about this man. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about the religious atmosphere that Jesus was living in, the Pharisees, Sadducees. We mentioned the Essenes, but they weren't big players in Palestinian religious life as much, just because they withdrew. They weren't involved in the politicking of religion. And yes, we know that does happen. So we looked a little bit about that and how Jesus was rebellious, though not in the way that we maybe sometimes think about being rebellious. But he was trying to explain what he believed God's heart was for his laws, instead of being burdened with hundreds of ticky-tack little laws. He was trying to explain the heart of God, and that's why he broke the Sabbath. That's why he broke ceremonial laws, and that's why he broke the stock market when he overturned the table. So that was kind of our last two explorations, and today our topic is called Social Wildcard. We're going to explore Jesus as kind of a rebel against what society said was normal, how to act, who to talk to. And hopefully you've got your printable and you can take some notes, and we'll pause for a commercial break in here somewhere, and we'll pause to do some drawings that I think you'll like. And I'm just glad that you're here. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Mark, I'm going to hand it over to you to kick us off, and I'm going to pull up the document that you sent me so I can follow along with you and butt in, as is my joy and privilege.
Well, like Amie said, today we are talking about Jesus as sort of a social wild card. And social norms are basically something that the people around us or that society kind of gives us pretty much cues as far as how to act. And so just to give some ideas as far as our own social norms, if I were to, let's say that I met you for the first time and I extended my hand, then what might somebody do? But probably shake it. Like,
hopefully. I know the COVID thing has got everyone scared, but in Arkansas, people would shake it. Where I'm from in the Midwest, it seems like more relaxed. So yeah, social norms have changed a little bit, but I get the expectation.
Okay, so let's see. if there's a line forming in the, somewhere, and I'm like, okay, well, I want to get whatever's there. Am I going to go to the front of the line, or am I going to, like, what am I going to do?
You better not go to the front of the line. You better go behind me.
Absolutely. You get the back of the line. Like, some things that we take for granted, that kind of society has kind of, like, things that we just know that, you learn growing up, whether it's, like I said, shaking somebody's hand when they extend it if you meet them, or if it's making eye contact with somebody when you're speaking with them. If I can't make it, I'm going to be late. Like last night, I was pretty much almost late. I had to call ahead and let Amie know, I can't be there as I'm supposed to be there, whatever else. But, there are different things that we take for granted that we consider norms of society. And so if people were to break these norms, we might look at them kind of like they're different, or like there's something wrong with them. If we're sitting in a movie theater and let's say it's not full, it's relatively empty, and somebody comes and sits right next to you, and I'd be like, no, you just, there's just, right. We don't, no one has ever said don't do that, but we just know some things that we just kind of tend to accept and learn along the way. And so there are lots of norms that we recognize now. And back then, it's a different time, it's a different place. And we sometimes forget those things when we look at the life of Jesus. There's some things that we might miss or take for granted. And so, Jesus comes at a time, and this is the first thing on our printable. It's a time in history when there is political unrest. There is, we have the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes. Those are the three that Amie talked about last night. We also have the Zealots, the Herodians, and the Samaritans, and they're all living within like the same place or places, basically, all while being under the foot of Rome. So you have them kind of going with each other. And then also them all saying, let's team up from time to time to fight Rome, and then let's fight each other because we're not happy about how we fight Rome. And so unrest. You have economic instability. Back then there's no such thing as middle class. People are either extremely rich, and that's about 3% of people, or they are extremely poor, and that's about 90% of people. But most people who were extremely poor, they didn't know if they would have enough to survive just for that day. And so there's little hope of being able to save money or save up to, better things. And some people have even estimated that as far as that 28% of people in the population when Jesus was alive, that they didn't know if they would have the basic things to sustain life. So, there's political unrest.
I know people do talk about the differences in class, and some places I've heard that. I did not realize that it was that way, and that 90+% of people were subsistence, hand to mouth kind of living.
Oh, yeah. So we have political unrest, we have economic instability, we also have cultural division. And kind of, this is once again piggybacking off of what we taught, what we learned earlier. But you have Jews and Samaritans, they have a strong dislike for each other, and we'll get more into that later. And then amongst the Jews, they question each other's motives because of how they deal with Rome. The Pharisees and Sadducees, and Amie talked about that last night. If you have not yet seen it, you can go look up Jesus Break Things. It's our second video. I think you would definitely enjoy it. But so back then in this time, it's a different time, different place. You have political unrest, economic instability, cultural divisions. You have stuff like with purity and defilement. The Jewish people had a strong idea about what was clean and unclean. And so they would express it different ways. When it comes to things that are clean or positive, it'd be like, Jerusalem, that's a holy city. Or they might say the temple is a holy place, or the Sabbath is a holy day. But as far as, things that were negative or unclean, contact with the corpse, definitely not. Like you don't do that, you'll be unclean. A woman who's menstruating, that's unclean. Or if a man had recently had a sexual discharge, that's unclean. And these things are not necessarily bad. It's just that if you come into contact with these people, or if you do this, then you are considered unclean in the society. And
that's such an interesting thought, because you look at where it started, and unclean was just a designation for people to know, like, think about this. Like, God God was not being arbitrary or trying to punish people, but he did ask that if you came into contact with these things, that you would, that you would wash, that you would spend time purifying, which time doesn't really do anything for like the germs. I mean, I guess it does with disease control and early quarantine, I guess, but a day doesn't really do anything. So it's funny and interesting to me hearing this in our times now with the clean and unclean, realizing God was trying to do some health protocols without explaining it out to people who didn't understand what germs were. But that's what made it become bad. That's what made people look down upon someone who is unclean, because now they had to go, I have to go remove myself from real life. I have to go purify and go through all these rituals. And that kind of bred in them a snobbery because they didn't really understand what was going on. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely.
All right. Sorry. Maybe totally off track, but I just.
No, I love the additional insights that you're sharing. Like, let's not take anything for granted. And plus, you're highlighting things. So no, perfect. So this is the time we're living in, like as far as when it comes to Jesus. And so, like I said, it's a different kind of culture. And so Jesus, as I'm hoping to present today, is kind of the guy who in the empty theater sits next to you, or is the person who does not extend his hand when you shake it, when you say, let's shake, or the person that doesn't maintain eye contact. And sometimes we miss these things when we put, when we say the life of Jesus, and it's like, okay, it's not as obvious, but hopefully we can make this case today that Jesus, he's just a different guy. As the title says, he's a social wild card. You never know what he's going to do in any situation to upset the social norms. But I'm sure that there's a reason for that, but we'll see if we can make that case today.
All right, we'll pick that up in a moment. Your favorite and mine, Chad Reed, has just joined us for a word from our first century sponsor for the day. I'm going to add Chad to the stream and give him the solo. Chad, tell us about a work of art. It looks like you're muted. Did I mute you? No, I can't unmute you. Well, let's try to connect him again. All right, we'll get back to Chad in a second. We'll take this opportunity then to do a couple of drawings. As you know by now, I'm sure if you have registered, your name is in the drawing for these items. Let me show you them today. Oh, first of all, the thing I'm not showing you because it's an ebook is a fantastic book called Life in Year One. And I would like to give away a copy of that today. So if you're watching this now, if you're watching this a little bit later, the way you claim your prizes is by emailing me. It's askachristianfriend@gmail.com. You can tell me what email address you want these sent to, and you can tell me your physical address for the physical product. So the awesome book, Life in Year One, goes to Lorianne. So Lorianne, just email me and make sure I'm sending the ebook to the right place. These will go back in for a second draw and for the final drawing. Next one, I won't say one for the ladies because I do realize that men like good skincare, but maybe not generally as many men like a fluffy headband. But we do have a fluffy spa headband and then a product called Peel Off Facial Mask, a tea tree product for cleansing. Let us see. Good morning, Alondra. That goes to Gregory J. Gregory J, if you'll email me, I'll send those products right to you. And the last thing, I know this is going to seem boring to you, but I guarantee there is someone out there who needs a new tablecloth, probably for Thanksgiving or right after. Maybe someone has spilled something on your tablecloth. Oh, look at that. It goes to my housemate, Alondra Gutierrez. This one was totally rigged. I just bought Alondra a tablecloth because apparently the detergent I use makes blue stains. So anyway, all right. Make sure that you email me. Alondra, you do not have to email me. I know where you live. And we'll get those prizes right out. All right, let's see if Chad's back with audio. It looks like it. Now, a word from our sponsor.
So sorry, I had technical difficulties with my microphone, so I switched headsets.
No worries.
Today's video is brought to you by our friends at A Work of Heart. A Work of Heart is a mixed media and jewelry studio in San Jose, California that specializes in art, art supplies, and art classes. Yes, A Work of Heart believes that art doesn't have to be limited to just a handful of chosen people working on the temple anymore. And they would like to help you pursue your passion, whether it might be drawing water from a well, painting your doorposts for Passover, making breakable clay pots for your metaphors, or turning perfectly good jewelry into something else. A Work of Heart can help you develop your skills to express yourself with their online courses and videos led by both local and national teachers. That's right, local and national teachers. And with their wide selection of vintage finds, you are sure to find something so colorful and expressive that it would make even the woman of Babylon jealous. We just ask that you try not to use your newfound talents for any graven images or golden calves. But let's not beat around the burning bush anymore. Check out their website at www.aworkofheart.com, where you can see what online classes they offer and what supplies they have available right now on Etsy. That's at A Work of Heart. A Work of Heart believes that everyone is an artist with the right resources, for they are the potter and your art is the clay. Let them inspire your creativity today. Visit them at aworkofheart.com.
Oh my goodness. Chad, it's so good to know that you're human. Thank you. Andrea Chevalou is a great friend of ours, and she's the owner at A Work of Heart. We do hope that you will check her out when you get a chance. It's therapeutic, and she's got an awesome studio in San Jose where there are also always kittens up for adoption. So fun person, fun place. Thank you, Chad, for putting your talents to work for her. And we will see you next time. Do you know who you're doing tomorrow yet, Chad?
Tomorrow, it's probably going to be Rio's chiropractic.
Okay. All right. We'll stay tuned for that. Thank you so much, Chad. And also,
thank you.
It was fun.
Thanks, Chad.
All right, Mark, we're back to you now and picking up where you left off.
Okay, so we set the stage for the culture back then. So we're going to sit here and just race through 4 quick stories that I think are somewhat familiar that we can say we are aware of from the life of Jesus. And so while the base of these stories come from the Protestant Bible, we'll see. So first we have Jesus disregards the teachers. And this is found.
Oh, I did want to interrupt and say that I forgot to mention earlier, we talked about how the majority of the information about economic times and spiritual times and or the religious times of Jesus, we're drawing from Josephus and his giant work, giant body of work. So this would be way too many historical references to put in here, but we just want you to know that we have looked at some of those things and we are reading from the Bible today because it's most accessible, makes the most sense to most people. All right. Sorry about that, Mark. Carry on.
No, I'm glad that you gave us the reminder. So Jesus is basically one day, as he often was prone to, he is teaching or preaching, however you want to describe it. And so this is found in Matthew 5. But Jesus, he gives a sermon or a speech or a talk, and he goes through a number of things. And even though you can read it right now, probably about 20 minutes or so, it's generally understood that it would have been much longer than this, but they kind of just took like the high points as it was passed down orally, as far as things that it's kind of like somebody who has like, the same sermon or stump speech, like you give it over and over again. And so they probably took the key points of the stump speech or the sermon, and as it was passed over time, they made it more concise for people to hear it. And so taking one portion of this stump speech or sermon, he talks about, murder and adultery. He quotes Exodus. He talks about divorce and he quotes Deuteronomy. He talks about swearing or making oaths, which he then quotes Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. He talks about vengeance and love.
Can we go on a side note? Do we have time?
I think so.
What is the deal about swearing or making oaths? Like,
well,
why is that a prohibition?
Well, back then, I want to say it was, I refused to get caught in the headlights.
Oh, yes.
So I'm actually.
You called it out on yourself. I wouldn't have thought about it.
My goal is to keep that off of here as much as possible, and I refuse to let Amie stump me, or at least I'll do my best. But obviously, it's not going to happen every time.
Well, I just want you guys to know that Mark is a denominational employee, and so his words can be measured and used against him. So when he does that, it's not because he doesn't know to say; it's because he knows 3 things to say, and he's like, which is the appropriate one. So
she's way too kind. Thank you, but you're way too generous with that.
Oh, you're welcome. All right. We don't have to talk about it anyway. I thought it would be a quick aside. Don't do it. That's what Jesus was saying.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so now Jesus, when he's giving this talk, so don't forget, we learned that religious life was very much intertwined with like the life of people back then, whether you were, an Israelite or if you were Roman or whatever else. Like they didn't separate the two. But when he's giving this talk, he's talking to people who, the Pharisees and the priests, they hold a heavy sway over people's lives. And so the Pharisees had mapped out what they considered to be the proper course for attaining righteousness through their interpretation of the Protestant Bible and what we call the Old Testament or the Torah. And so one facet of this is basically real legalistic. Like I said, Amie broke it down. It's in our second video, Jesus Breaks Things. So this sermon, as it's recorded, like I said, we can easily read it in about 20 minutes, but it obviously was longer than that because we read that Jesus often talked to people all day. When he had a crowd of 5,000 people or a crowd of 4,000 people, like his talks, they weren't just a short little thing. But this one, we hear him say 6 different.
We read the words in red as if they're actually what Jesus said in the King James English. We were laughing about that in our commercial. But that is a summary of what Jesus said because, Mark, I believe you said that, ink and paper was way too expensive to be writing superfluous things. So interesting thought that I didn't realize until adulthood. I really thought that's all Jesus said. I'm like, well, sure wish someone was walking around recording everything because it doesn't seem like he talked a lot.
You are hilarious. For those who don't know her sense of humor, either you're in on the joke or you're not. But so right here, there are 6 things. And Jesus actually says, you've heard, but I say. And so, and he does this right in front of the people who are saying these things. And so it's like, let's imagine Amie being right here in front of me. And I'm like, okay, so you heard Amie say that there's this guy who does X, Y, Z, but actually this. It just takes a certain kind of person just to be that brazen, like to go against authority and be like, yeah, that's cool, but actually no. And here's something better, or they got it wrong.
Yeah, and it's not over trivial things either. It's about the kernels of what it means to follow God, the kernels of what it means to please God. And so I'm sure to the Pharisees and Sadducees, that kind of started the threat. Like, oh, wow, he's bold enough to call out our teachings. It's a good old fashioned debate, except that they're not inviting Jesus to the table. Like they're doing their thing. So he's like, okay, well, I'll just gather a crowd then.
And they happen to be in the crowd as well. And he's like, oh, you're here, but I'm still going to say it anyway.
Boo! I wonder how much booing and murmuring was going on.
And so when you look closely at what he says, he's not teaching against like the actual law or the stuff that they learned in the Torah, but he's teaching against faulty interpretations or like bad applications of that. And so, like I said, but the main point is that he's doing this right in front of the people who did the bad application and who did the bad interpretation. And so, I'm sorry?
Public shaming.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, Jesus was like,
okay. Make us like Jesus less. I mean, that's, you know, if one of my church members were to take one of my other church members and post them up like that, I don't know that I'd be impressed. So that's, you know, that could be an ugly look. If this is all we knew about Jesus, that could be an ugly look. But for the people who want to be defended or who felt like they've been wronged or disadvantaged, that feels like a good look to them. They're like, yeah, finally someone's speaking up. We can't be oppressed like this. I don't want to run ahead of myself.
No. Look, I love it. You can only add to this thing. But ultimately what this does as far as Jesus breaking social norms around us is that basically he elevates himself, or with his teaching, he's elevated, making his pronouncements the equivalent of like the Torah that was given before. And you know, you can't just make a claim like this. I mean, this is some big news. Like this is pretty outrageous. And it's like, wait, if you're saying this, then that implies that. And so let's say Jesus was humble, but Jesus also was bold. And so he elevates himself, like I said, above the other interpreters, and also matching even the Torah. Like I said, keep in mind, the Pharisees are right there to see this and to hear this. Our first thing on our principle, there are 4 ways that Jesus challenged the status quo. So one of them, and it just as we go into this, but one of them we saw like last night when Jesus breaks things, in particular the stock market, and that Jesus rejected business as usual, and whether that meant actual business or if that meant, you know, this is the way things were done. But secondly, the second way that Jesus challenged the status quo is that he turned the law on its head. And that's what we see right here. He's saying, you've heard this, but I say that. And so yeah, this wasn't Roman law. This was, you know, the man-made religious laws that, you know, that became a yoke. Next, he made outrageous claims. You know, we'll see later on some of the outrageous stuff that Jesus actually said about himself, or, you know, the implications thereof. And he shunned politics as usual because he had all kinds of followers, and he pushed back against people when they tried to make him a king. And so Jesus, like, you know, it's just socially, I won't say socially awkward, but like I say, socially pushing boundaries. And so we go from Jesus basically disregarding the teachers in front of the teachers to now a story in Mark as far as Jesus touches someone who's unclean. Because remember, we talked about, the rituals and, clean and unclean, but now Jesus goes from not only talking about something to now actually doing something. This is found in Mark chapter 1. And the text says, a man with leprosy came and knelt in front of Jesus, begging to be healed. If you're willing, you can heal me and make me clean, he said. Moved with compassion, Jesus reached out and touched him. I am willing, he said, be healed. Instantly, the leprosy disappears. Now, we're not here to talk about the miraculous parts. We're just here to talk about the actual, the acts thereof. And so when it says that a man with leprosy came to him, this we can miss that so easily. We read that with our eyes today. Okay, a man with leprosy. But leprosy was a widespread disease back in Palestine. And it's apparent because there are a number of texts that say that Jesus encountered lepers. So it was something that it was scary, but it was common. And so,
I've heard people kind of liken, leprosy was the cancer of their day, their age. It uprooted lives, separated people, there wasn't a lot of hope. However, there's a huge difference because as far as I know, there's no research that says that cancer is catching. You can still be with your family. You can still have support, emotional support. But that's not the case with leprosy. It totally divided the victim from humanity.
And Amie is quoting basically, or she's referencing the laws back then, or the Levitical laws, because if you were thought to have had leprosy, it was okay, look, go see the priest, because the priest had a whole bunch of stuff where they could sit here and determine whether it was, color of your hair, or the way that, that your skin is discolored, or if things are falling off, whatever else, to determine if it's leprosy. And
The
if you
smell
were,
of your flesh.
oh yes, and if it was determined that you were a leper, then you were banished. You're like, hey, you need to stay where you are. And you were then considered unclean. And you were like a corpse, because like Amie said, it's contagious, or it's catching. And it was thought that you could impart your uncleanness on objects or other people or anything within the same enclosure. And so as a result, this person is viewed as a living corpse, which we learned earlier, you don't touch corpses because those are considered unclean. And so they took this so seriously that anybody that had this disease, they had to wear torn clothes. They had to let their hair be unkept. Like, they were not allowed to even comb their hair or brush their hair. They had to cover the lower part of their face and cry out, unclean, unclean. And as long as they were infected, they had to live alone. They had to live outside of the camp or live outside the city. And so basically, with rules like this, not only is being a leper like an illness, but it's also a sentence, because the purpose is, look, if you're a leper, you're separated, you're pushed aside, and we don't want to spread disease or religious impurity within the community. And so we then read that Jesus is filled with compassion. And when Amie, we talked about different variants in text slightly on our first night, how we know what we know, when they would sit there and copy things, because one of the earliest manuscripts actually says not filled with compassion or filled with pity, but actually says
said not
anger.
filled with it.
Oh, no. It doesn't say that. It says filled with anger.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
And sometimes, we can trust, it sounds alarming, but usually that's why we know it's true, because people, even though they would not do this lightly, they would sometimes say, okay, let's kind of clean up the language a little bit so that it can be more acceptable. But we found earlier manuscripts that are like, no, you can't do that. And so usually in the academic circles, the harder reading, or the one that's more disturbing, is considered the one that is more accurate and more true. And it says that Jesus is filled with anger. And so we don't think it's anger at the leper, because, obviously Jesus, touches him, but it's more so like when in the book of Judges, like, no, God became sad and indignant over the misery of Israel. So it seems as though Jesus' anger, if that is indeed the word that's there, it's because of the misery of the leper. And so in the story that you read so quickly, Jesus' response is no less scandalous than that of the leper. Like, the leper is bold and he has audacity, because he's supposed to say unclean and keep his distance, but he comes up to Jesus saying, hey, please heal me. And Jesus, Jesus, instead of turning away from him or saying, hey, like, back up, Jesus actually goes towards him and touches him. And so Jesus, by doing that, removes the social, physical, and spiritual separations that the Torah and the custom of the day demanded. And so Jesus is like, okay, look, somebody unclean, I can touch you. So not only did he put the law in his head, but he's breaking social norms. And back then, they would never speak of leprosy as far as being healed, but being cleansed, because they thought it was something deeper than just that. And so even by implication, Jesus is basically suggesting that he can forgive sins. Like I said, making outrageous claims, or like claims are like that would be thought to be outrageous, or like, hey, that's kind of doing a lot.
Wow.
And so,
yeah, that's an interesting differentiation between saying like you're cleansed, which sounds like a temporary solution, and you're healed, which sounds like a permanent solution. That's really cool.
So we go from Jesus Jesus dismissing the teachers basically in front of the teachers. That's not, we wouldn't do that nowadays, to Jesus touching somebody who's unclean, to then Jesus being cool with somebody touching him who is unclean. And so, and we're going to go through this one, because this one is a hybrid between our last story and our next story. So the points are kind of the same between the two of them. but
I think
it's found.
this is most interesting to me because who should be the workers of mercy in this situation? Who should be, like, if there was any population that felt like they had God's protection or that it was their job to look out for, these people, who should it be and what was a normal protocol? I mean, were there workers of mercy who would bring lepers food and shelter and, warm clothes? Was that the family's job? If they didn't have a family, did it fall to the religious leaders? Those are questions that, I need to see if Josephus or someone else says, because I don't know. But you would hope that it would come from the religious people. And I love that differentiation between Jesus and, so here the religious leaders, they find it their job to tell people what's wrong with them. But that's where it sits, right? That's where it sits. Like, okay, I pronounce you unclean. Great. What now? We don't know. Why don't you go off on your own and figure it out? And Jesus, according to this story, if this text is reliable, which we believe it is, Jesus is the guy who says, hey, you've been pronounced unclean, but I'm going to come towards you. That is an interesting characteristic. Thank you, Mark.
No, thank you. So our next one comes from Luke, who is a historian in his own right. And like I said, this one is a hybrid between the previous story and the next story. But Jesus is walking one day. He's going with a guy who is a synagogue president or leader to go and try to check him on his daughter. Along the way, a woman with, as the text describes, an issue of blood. I mean, basically, someone described it as either constant hemorrhaging or as like constant menstruating. Like she comes up, touches Jesus, and a big old crowd of people. He's like, "Who touched me?" Now, like I said, we can skip over all of the things, but we got to leave the context.
I'm sure it's not just the bloody nose. I'm just laughing because, as we talked about previously, like, it's so funny to me how, unless you're medical, and even then people try to be careful, but unless you're medical, you don't just go throwing around discussions about blood. I can see Luke like gingerly writing it down, like, there is a woman here with a issue of blood. Even the writing of it seems a little bit hands off. So,
no, you're absolutely right. I remember I was talking with Amie before. And I remember in high school, a high school student tried to do a talk on this text, and he ended up offending all of the women and girls in our high school. It was like that and he was careful with it, but he just wasn't careful enough, I guess. And it was like, yeah. So I can only imagine Luke in this time, like Amie said, trying to be like, how can I write this as gingerly as possible? And so,
okay. But the truth is, nobody likes menstruation. Nobody likes hemorrhaging. These are not what can be sad or offensive. Is that there's something? It's like, all right, there's something about like, all right, well, if it comes from her femininity, it's a dysfunction and a curse of something that was given to females. So it feels like rejection of females. And even more personally, like, if anyone's ever tried to have their husband or boyfriend or brother buy them tampons, like, it's just something that makes people feel real weird and creeped out on. So we still get that today. So yeah, it's funny and sad at the same time, but go back. What does Jesus do?
So, so a lot of people are like, yo, this lady who has this issue is touching him. Like, first off, women, like, you can't do that. But Jesus, as Amie has said, if we find the text to be reliable, which this is one that we do, that we can say, especially I would say Luke, as far as one that we can say, we have more reason to believe this than not believe it. He's like, no, I'm not mad. I'm not even taken aback. He doesn't reject her or reprimand her. He just says, hey, daughter, and they have an interaction. And so basically signifying, hey, I care about you. And you and your issue are more important than our customs or than what we consider our traditional boundaries. And there are a lot of things in this text as well, like the fact that you have a woman, crossing all kinds of lines, like, coming out. Like she must have been desperate if she's going to sit here and break the laws. But Jesus, instead of being offended, is like, hey, I can deal with this. Like, it's one thing to deal with somebody who's a leper. And then, but now with this one, as far as somebody who's like, wait, they're both unclean. And like I said, people that you would not be around back then as far as societal norms. But Jesus, once again, instead of making eye contact with people, basically, as we would today, we're talking to them, he's like, no, it's gonna be okay. But like I said, we're gonna race through this one because we're gonna kind of get the combination between our last one. And this is a well-known story, and it's found in John chapter 4. And so, Amie, can I actually ask you to pick that up in John chapter 4, just maybe verses 4 through 10 or 4 through 9?
You can ask me, but it'll take me a second to get there because I have your document up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Oh, then actually, I think it's in the document.
Oh, well, I just closed it. John 4, what is it?
4 through 9.
4 through 10?
We can go 10 or 9 or 10, whichever one. Let's go 10.
Okay. This is New International Version. Now he had to go through Samaria, so he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. A lot of Genesis names in here. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. 10:2?
Yes.
Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Just to close out the story.
Now, this is the one that has all kinds of, when Amie and I were discussing this, it was, there are so many things wrong with this thing right here. There are 3 reasons why this conversation should not have happened. And so we're ending with Jesus ask a question. That's what we call this section, I guess. And the first one, there is a gender boundary, and you can write that in your printable.
Okay.
Back then, men and women don't talk to each other in public, especially not strangers. And so this is scandalous.
Okay. Exclusion for family members or?
Even family members, you wouldn't really talk in public. Like sometimes it was an exclusion, but for the most part, what I've actually seen, because there was some debate on that, but it seems that it's more commonly accepted in public. We don't speak. Like,
oh
women,
my goodness.
And so, but there might be an exclusion, like you said, for family members, but strangers, definitely not. Like this is taboo. Like what's wrong with you? And so
wow.
this is she's out of her place in this culture, and he's like doing something that's beneath him, and like, yo, you're really gonna scandal your name right now. So there's a gender boundary that's been crossed. Okay. The next one, there is a racial boundary that's been crossed. So
kind of. It's a half racial boundary. I say that because if you trace the lineage of the Samaritans back, they are related. They have the same, well, I know according to the Bible, you can all trace your history back, but that's not what I mean. I mean, like, these people are related.
No, and Amie's absolutely right. And so quick background, when part of Israel had been conquered, just the Northern Kingdom, but I don't want to get too far into it, by the Assyrians, it's like 72 BCE. And the Assyrians repopulate the region with people from their empire. And so now you have like small remnants of the Israelites now mixed with Persians and with other conquered people. So now, back then, the Israelites believed that they had been overtaken because of paganism and because of bad practices. But now you have all those bad practices and all these religious impure things mixing through the land. And so it becomes quite famous or infamous. So, but like Amie said, there's bad blood. Pretty much, it's only half bad blood. as far between people, because Samaritans rejected the writings of the prophets and the wisdom literature. They only accepted the Pentateuch.
Okay.
Their worship was centered on a new place of worship. So they rejected the Jerusalem temple. And when the temple in Jerusalem was being rebuilt, the Samaritans offered to help, but the Israelites and Jews were like, no, we'll do it ourselves. Like, we don't want your help.
Oh, they spurned a good faith offer?
Oh, indeed.
Yeah, that would make me be like, okay, well, I guess you're not coming over for pizza Saturday night.
Yeah, no pizza invite.
No, I know that. Yeah, that hurts, man. That hurts real bad.
And
all right, well,
it goes both ways. And so when Alexander the Great and other Greek generals, they controlled Palestine around 330 BCE, they purposely made Samaria an important base because they knew that they would find sympathetic anti-Jewish allies. Like it went back and forth.
One of the reasons that Alex was so great is because he thought about stuff like that, huh?
Absolutely. And the Jews, they actually, when they had their chance about 200 years later, they attacked Samaria and they burned down the Samaritan temple that had been on Mount Gerizim. So, So by this time, there was a very serious racial boundary or racial tension. So this is a second reason that this conversation should not have taken place. First off, it's taboo. There's a gender boundary. But second, Jesus is breaking this thing because there's like a racial boundary tension. Last, this conversation should not taking place because there is a social boundary or social stigma. Back during this time, water is, retrieved in the morning or like in the cool of the day, because if you went in the middle of the afternoon, it was way too hot. So you would have to go early in the morning or like, maybe like around 5 or 6 p.m., depending on, time of year or else. Kind of like when we do, if you do like your chores on the ranch or the farm in the morning, you're trying to beat the heat. And so water collection was the responsibility of women, but in a culture that had women isolated, it wasn't entirely burdensome because this became an opportunity for women to talk to each other and to kind of hang out. So
that whole water cooler thing did not start in the office setting, right?
Nah, we were a couple thousand years late to the party.
Way back. That's cool.
So the fact that Jesus goes there to rest in the middle of the day and she comes there, you see that she is basically once again isolated because she should have been there with other people either in the morning or in the evening, but she's going in the very middle of the day when it's hottest. And so no one would do this unless they basically were shunned. Like, okay, if you come here, then you're going to be talked about, or, hey, we don't want to be around you. And so people have been led to believe and believe that there were some things going on with her personally, that people, gossiping and whatever else. And so she's like, no, I don't want to be a part of that. And people are like, we don't want you a part of this. So she makes it a point to avoid, those circles. And so the fact that she's there, Jesus is like, okay, I'm going to cross the social boundary. And so really anybody seeing this conversation take place, and right now they'd be like, what is going on here? Why are you having this kind of conversation? And the surprising thing is not that Jesus would ask her for help. It's that Jesus would talk to her, period. She's a woman and she's a Samaritan woman, and she's a Samaritan woman who has a bad reputation. Like there's literally nothing that Jesus should be doing to talk to her. He asked a question.
Basically, you did not have to be a prophet to know that if someone was coming to get water in the middle of the day, something was wrong. They had a bad reputation. Like that wasn't Jesus's insight. That was not a miraculous happening.
No.
Okay.
That's just context clues.
Yeah.
Now, what was said maybe as far as the conversation, that could have been insight, but as far as just him seeing her, right. But no, but you're absolutely right. So Jesus asked the question, we get me a drink. And, normally we say, when people talk about this, oh, that's disrespectful. You're asking her to go and get something for you. You don't even know her. And he's like, no, I'm actually doing a favor. Oh, yes.
Do we know when the disciples came back and what part of the conversation? We don't know. Do we?
I'm not sure which part of the conversation was.
Now them asking Jesus if he wants something to eat is even funnier to me because it's like a distraction. Like, you know how it is when you're talking to somebody who's a little unsavory. You hope your friends are going to come rescue you. Now I see it as the disciples are like, should we rescue Jesus? Yeah. Offer him some food. Or like, why is he talking to that character? Let's get, like, why is our leader talking to that person? So I don't know what the disciples were thinking, but it's a funny idea.
No, I didn't think about that. But when they do come, whenever it is, he basically waves them off like, no, we're going to keep this conversation going. Like, no, I don't need saving.
I see myself as Peter, like going back to other guys, like, at least I tried, like it's not on me. I tried to help him out. So it's because I'm not great
person. You're hilarious. But we normally see, will you get me a drink? Or can you give me a drink of water? And so it's like, Jesus seems kind of out of line. But with this one question, Jesus once again breaks social norms, but he does it in a way, that he lets her know that he first sees her as a human being and as a person. Like Jesus acknowledges that before politics, because don't forget, when it comes to Samaritans and when it comes to, different issues, he's like, no, I see you. Like I'm going to acknowledge you, the person, before I sit here and deal with things that are political in nature. Mm-hmm. Jesus is like, I'm going to sit here and acknowledge you as an individual as opposed to your social identity. And Jesus, with that question, will you give me a drink of water, prioritizes a relationship with her as opposed to the generally assigned or accepted role that she was to play. And so Jesus, breaks all kinds of norms in just 4 short stories. And we know that there are a lot more stories we haven't even touched on yet, but he does it not for shock value. He doesn't do it just to be different or to rub somebody the wrong way. But it seems that Jesus pushes back on societal norms, on the accepted norms, because he wants people to be encouraged, one, that they have value and that they matter. And that showing that, hey, if society's doing something to marginalize people, such as the lepers, like, hey, no, we can get mad about it and do something. Or it's okay to reach across social, political, and gender lines. If we, and when we do that, great things can happen. And also, investigate things for yourself. Don't just listen to what somebody else says, or don't just sit here and get caught up in making life hard for people. Like, you said, you've heard, but I say this. And so Jesus was definitely a social rebel. He pushed back. And we might say, if he was here today, it might be that awkward person, like, they're just kind of weird or just whatever else. But Jesus was that guy. But he did it to make people's lives better and to make sure that they knew that he cared about them and that they had a place in what he was hoping to establish. So, Amie, that's all I got for today. I want to kick it back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think, asking from maybe a little bit more of a skeptical viewpoint, Christians rightly, talk about how great Jesus is, how many cool things he did, how he cared, how he's compassionate. I guess my real question is, was this really that strange, or was this really that unusual by itself? Like, is this the character trait of Jesus that really made him stand out? I don't know. What do you think?
I think character trait, I think it's one of the things that he was willing to push back against society, that there was no limit to where and how he would push back, but that he wouldn't just push back for the sake of it, but to make a bigger point. So I think it definitely is a character trait when you look at what he did. I mean, ultimately his pushing back got him killed. So I think it's a major trait. Okay. I think they're like, this guy's doing too much. Like, this guy's out here, like, he's talking about something much bigger, much different. So I would say it was a big trait of his. Not the only trait, but I think we see a pattern.
I'm trying to measure Jesus by other great historical figures, and a lot of great historical figures who have taken up the cause for the sick, the needy, the powerless. A lot of them have come from wealth. And it's interesting because Jesus' story is that he did not come from earthly wealth. He was part of that 90+% hand-to-mouth subsistence. And so him being able to say, like, really getting ahead in life, talking to the right people, being seen with the right people is not a concern of mine because, I'm about my Father's business. That's a differentiator. I think. But yeah, just like I was saying before, the thing that strikes me about all of this is that it is an indictment against organized religion. This is the skeptic, the rebellious heart in me coming out. It's an indictment against religion, because the people that you think should understand the kingdom of God, the people that you think should be out doing service projects, you think should be organizing people to say, your family is already struggling so much, and now you have to care for a leper, or now you have to, worry about your wayward daughter who's had 6 men and now is living with the 7th. Like, the things that are going wrong, the religious people are the ones pronouncing judgment, saying that this is against God's will, or, I don't know how to cite this source. This is just something that I grew up hearing, but you grow up hearing that terrible things that happen to people were seen as a result of their sin or generational sin, which we know is not always the case. Jesus came to correct some of that. So anyway, the point is, you would hope that the organized religion, being closer to the will of God, or claiming to know the will of God, would have been the thing that gave them passion, compassion, that they would be known throughout the world. But that doesn't come till later. We don't read that in the annals until later, that was a result of Jesus stirring the pot a little bit. So that's, I think, what I find the most fascinating here, is that I wish it read differently, but it doesn't. It was remarkable. And he did get accused of hanging out with sinners. Oh, as if we all aren't sinners. He did get accused of hanging out with people who are drunk and messed up. And can the same be said about us? Sure. I sure hope so. Kind of puts a spin on what you'd like to be known for.
I would say so.
Well, Mark, thank you for your time. We've come to the end of our chat today, and I sure hope that those of you who are watching were blessed. It was a blessing just knowing that you're on here with us. And as I go out, I'm just going to run through those announcement slides one more time and talk a little bit about what's upcoming. Feel free to leave at your leisure. First of all, just a reminder that you will have study printables available before every meeting. And I just need your email address for that. Here's a look at the schedule for the rest of our meetings. We've got tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. Mark and I will still be apart. He's down in Southern California, and I'm going to be in Lodi tomorrow. But and then we will repeat the same schedule we did this weekend, Thursday through Sunday. We'll do that next weekend. You can see a little bit about the upcoming topics here. Feel free to take a screenshot if you're signed up for our email updates. I can send you that as well. It was in our email this morning. Of course, we have enjoyed Chad's First Century sponsorships. We do want to let you know that we have one spot left. We would love to fill it with a local California business or a national business. If you're a manager, somebody who has the authority to give us permission to make a little fun, a little joke about your business while still providing real info on how people can contact you, I'd love to hear about it. I especially am going to call out Danny and Zulema. I would love to represent your business. Also a reminder that you can be in the drawing for nightly prizes or daily prizes, I guess, since we're meeting this morning, and that everybody will be back in the drawing for the family s'mores kit. It is not an open flame. It's safe and will toast up your marshmallows just right. So if you want to be in the running for our daily fun prizes, including books and socks and other weird things that I found at Home Goods, please make sure I have your email address. Lastly, is that a word? I never know. We are already thinking about our next online series. It's kind of a combination of a small group and a book club. A friend of mine has written this study called The Road, and I just bought it, so I haven't finished reading it, but chapter 1 has been awesome. So we're looking at spring 2021, and we would love for you to sign up. That link is below. If you're even interested, I'll let you know as we get closer. You probably won't hear anything from me until late December or January, but looking at doing that. So if you are interested in a study, basically I'm asking you if you like me. If you like me and you want to hang out with me, there's lots of small groups available. So I know that there's a vast stream of biblical info and fun info. So you don't have to feel like you need to, but I would love to see you back. You can give me your email address and I'll keep you up to date. All right, that is pretty much it. I want to say hi to the BGH. Hello to Alondra. Hello to Teresa. I know there's several of you who did not chime in today, but were listening. And we really appreciate just hanging out with you. So that's it for now. And we'll see you tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Pacific. Later.